Okay, here's a shot looking back towards the entrance. I'm a little bit further in, and looking down the tunnel here.
The year is 2013, and a man by the name of Frank found himself in a tiny and desolate town in Nevada called Kingston. Now, Kingston is a place with a population of less than 100 people, surrounded on one side by a sprawling mountain range and on the other by an endless expanse of desert. Now, given the town's remote nature, its only claim to fame were 2 abandoned mines which attracted the attention of curious adventurers like Frank. Now, Kingston is so tiny and isolated that it feels like it's been forgotten by the rest of the world. With no stoplights and really just a handful of buildings, including a laundromat and a saloon, it's a place where time seems to have stopped. But for Frank, exploring these mines wasn't just a hobby, it was a passion. Over the course of 5 years, he had diligently documented and uploaded his various videos on YouTube, all of his mining explorations. Despite having over 300 videos at the time, his channel remained relatively small, catering to a niche audience of like-minded explorers. This was a man who had a deep-seated passion for exploring the unknown. However, what he would later capture on video would not only baffle him, but would cause a frenzy among everyone who analyzed the footage. Now, on this particular day, Frank had set his sights on 2 particular mines just located a few miles from Kingston's center, the Victorine Mine and the Horton Mine, constructed in the late 1970s to early 80s with the hopes of being a profitable gold mine. However, much to the disappointment of those who built it, the mine failed to yield any gold deposits. Now, around the same time, the Victorine Mine was constructed at a higher elevation in search of that same elusive gold. This time, the miners struck gold and the Victorine Mine became a successful business venture. Now, in order to expedite the transportation of ore from the Victorine Mine to the workers below, a massive 900-foot chute was constructed, dropping directly into the Horton Mine from below. Now, this innovative system saved time and effort, allowing the ore to be quickly transported down the mountain and processed outside the mine. The Horton Mine was also equipped with a conveyor belt system that stretched the entire 600-foot length of the mine. Now, this conveyor belt, supported by chains hanging directly from the ceiling, efficiently moved the ore from the chute to the outside of the mine. However, in 1989, the Victorine Mine depleted its gold deposits, and both it and the Horton Mine were subsequently shut down. Now, over time, the mines were left abandoned, attracting urban explorers and adventurers just like Frank. Now, Frank drove to the western edge of Kingston, following the access road that led to the abandoned mines. The road was rough, treacherous, and narrow, cutting through vast desert landscape before suddenly veering up the mountainside. So Frank would park his car, grabbing his camera and equipment, and begin the steep trek towards the mines. Now, as he walked, Frank passed some old, rundown cabins that had been left to decay and rot after the mines had ceased operations. These cabins had once housed the mine workers, and their presence signaled that Frank was getting closer to his destination. Now, upon reaching the mines, Frank again set foot inside the Victorine Mine with his camera and explored fairly thoroughly. Now, we don't actually know what he filmed inside of the Victorine Mine because he never uploaded any of that footage of him in that particular mine. It was when he made his way to the entrance of the ominous-looking Horton Mine that he decided to hit record. The entrance to the Horton Mine looked like something straight out of Silent Hill, to be honest. Its entrance, standing 20 feet tall, was adorned with long strips of metal plating anchored to reinforce the crumbling structure and prevent it from collapsing. Despite their functional purposes, the copper plates gave off a very unwelcoming atmosphere. But Frank, being the avid, experienced explorer he was, decided to venture in despite the unsettling atmosphere, casually talking to the camera like it's no real big deal. Now, right away, Frank notices still stagnant water inside the entrance of the Horton mine. Now, this was very concerning, as stagnant water in abandoned mines can actually absorb poisonous gases, which could potentially be deadly if stepped on and disturbed. Now, despite the risk, Frank also notices footprints at the entrance, indicating that somebody else had been there recently. Now, this gave him some confidence, and so he cautiously decided to venture further in the mine. He also noticed collapsed-looking tubing hanging from the ceiling of the mine, which is actually the remnants of an old air filtration system. So as Frank cautiously treads further into the tunnel, there are also an array of metal chains dangling from the ceiling. Now, these chains, now eerily still, once served as a support for a conveyor belt system that carried the drilled ore outside the mine. Now, obviously, Frank here is a seasoned explorer and has been through hundreds and hundreds of mines before. But this one didn't sit right with him. He kept mentioning how he felt negative energy and like something or someone was watching him. He even admitted on camera that it was sketchy.
Yeah, this looks pretty sketchy.
He could just feel that he wasn't alone. And so as Frank pressed further into the depths of the Horton mine, he began to now notice something new: water running on the ground. Now, this was actually a very positive development for him, because in abandoned mines, stagnant water, like we just discussed, can trap poisonous gases, posing a significant threat to those who step in the puddles and release these hazardous vapors. Now, fortunately, the presence of running water indicated that the risk of encountering this extremely toxic gas was minimal, and it was relatively safer for Frank to continue to explore. But even with this reassurance, the eerie atmosphere around him had already got to him, really making him question if he should even continue further or not. And so he figured, you know what, I'm already this far, why not venture a bit further just to see what there is? And so he did. And as he ventured about roughly 100 feet into the mine, he made the decision then to turn his camera around and film the entrance, so that way you can get a depth perspective of just how far he had journeyed in the mine. Then he quickly turns his camera back around to face deeper into the mine, when he then decides to shine his flashlight in that same direction, and here is where he makes a disturbing discovery. Frank shines his flashlight down the tunnel to reveal a lone chain eerily swinging back and forth as if propelled by some unseen force. You can see him zooming in on it to try and figure out what on earth caused the chain swinging, but whatever it was clearly bothering him. I mean, just listen to the tone of his voice. He's left speechless. He quickly turns around, turns off the camera, and leaves the mine.
I don't know why that one chain is swinging back there. Don't know if you can see that in the video or not. Yeah, this mine definitely has a very spooky vibe to it. So I'm going to head back out and check out the other stuff that's here. This is just too wet, too muddy. And obviously something is making the chains swing. So time to get the hell out of here.
Now, shortly after leaving the mine, Frank goes back home and uploads this video to his YouTube channel. It wasn't put out there as a trap to go viral or to gain him any sort of notoriety. It was just a simple video like every other one he'd ever done to try and show his followers, hey, this is what happened while I was in the Horton mine. The video itself didn't even get a lot of views. A lot of his subscribers were not really sure what to make of this swinging chain, and Frank swore that it was not a hoax. Now, after that, Frank simply went back to making the kinds of videos he'd always made, exploring more mines, and for an entire year after that, the video would just sit vacant. And now, for whatever reason, in the YouTube algorithm, 1 year later, this video just blows up and goes viral. In fact, it became such a sensation that large YouTube personalities, celebrities, and even TV personalities all began to talk about and dissect this very footage. Then there was speculation that Frank himself was a hoaxer and was just trying to gain notoriety out of this. However, it was generally concluded that the footage of him entering the Horton mine was authentic. The real question among many people watching it was who caused the chain to swing. One side of the argument said that he caused it just so he can get a little supernatural flair in his videos, and to support that argument, if you watch his videos after this video, they all have a kind of looking for ghost tinge to it, as if he wanted to adapt this new style so he can go viral and make money or fame or whatever it is that they thought he had wanted. But the counter argument to that is that this is just a guy who likes going out and exploring mines and had just so happened to explore a mine when something supernatural occurred and caught it on video. You see, the other thing you have to remember is it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for this guy to just randomly make a video like this, considering this was already a passion for him. This was a channel he had been uploading to regularly for the past 5 years, and at this time had well over 300 videos. None of the other videos he had filmed had anything at all to do with anything ghostly or supernatural. And keep in mind, it's not like his following was huge by any stretch of the means at the time. Each video was only getting a few thousand views, if even that. So it's not like he was reaching for some huge YouTube career like Mr. Beast or Logan Paul or something. This was clearly something he just had a passion and love for. And also, when he uploaded the video originally, there was no context at all to it even alluding to something supernatural. I mean, it's not like the guy titled the video, "The Most Haunting Ghost Sighting You'll Ever See," or "I Saw This in the Mines." It was just a regular video of him going into the mines, and his whole approach to the video being uploaded was like, hey, I went to the Horton mines, here's what happened, make of it what you will, and he carries on his day. And this is me personally thinking, if you were wanting to really capitalize on that and really make it sensational, wouldn't you do something with the title and thumbnail? Wouldn't you really push that a lot? He didn't. Again, if you were just to look at his page, it would appear as just another regular upload, which makes me personally think he wasn't really digging for views and fame. The truth behind the mysterious swinging chain, the history of the Horton mine, and Frank's true intentions are all still a mystery. Now, it shouldn't come off as a surprise to anyone that Nevada has a host of strange supernatural things going on. I mean, everything from Area 51 to the multitude of cryptid and supernatural sightings all over the state. Following up on the Horton mine video, here are 3 alleged eyewitness stories of seeing and experiencing strange things right around that same area where the Horton mine is. All of them are, of course, anonymous. Now, the first story involves a man and his wife who in 2009 wanted to go and explore more in the desolate areas of the desert. And they had always been into abandoned mines and urban exploration in ghost towns, so this was right up their alley. And so that summer in 2009, they had decided to venture out around the same area in Nevada, right around Bunker Hill, specifically. Now, the husband would eventually note that he had heard from his close friends that there was a lot of ghost sightings and weird stuff happening right around here. Not specifically just Kingston, but the whole surrounding area. And so him and his wife at the time had a history of working a variety of security jobs for places like firms as well as casinos, and so they felt like they had enough experience to protect themselves if it ever came to that. He claimed that he felt well trained and prepared mentally and emotionally and physically if anything bad were to happen. So while him and his wife both had a weekend off, they would pack their SUV with camping gear, food, water, flashlights, a handgun, and any other various equipment they would need. Apparently, they were actually driving out from Las Vegas, and so they made their way all the way out past Kingston into Bunker Hill just as the sun was cresting behind the horizon. And they knew this outing was going to be glorious, a wonderful night of exploration. They could already feel the sense of anticipation and awe as they would look around them and just see the beautiful, desolate, mountainous, rocky terrain. But the eyewitness noted that there was just something eerie and off about where they were at. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but that his wife would later note that she felt it too. Now, as far as the husband and wife had noted, they were completely alone. There was nobody else around them for miles, it seemed. And in fact, they took that as a good thing because it means they would be uninterrupted in their exploration. So they quickly set up a small makeshift camp, began looking around for any supplies or anything they could use right away, but decided against it and just had a light camp. Now, by light camp, they meant that they had a small fire and didn't really set up tents or anything because they would eventually plan to sleep in their car. But they would take this opportunity to cook dinner and just sit and relax and wait till it got completely dark before they would set off on their exploration. And once it was dark enough, so probably roughly around 9 or 10 p.m. at night, both him and his wife would grab their flashlights, grab their equipment, and set off to start exploring the surrounding area. Now, this eyewitness didn't exactly specify if they were on top of Bunker Hill or just from the surrounding area, which in case if people out there don't know, it is very close to Horton Mine. And around this area are a lot of old abandoned mine shafts, and it just so happens that the eyewitness and his wife encountered one. He would later claim that it was roughly 30 minutes away from their car. They don't know how long it had been abandoned for, but it looked pretty rackety. So now as him and his wife prepare to go in, they notice that it looks pretty unsafe and that it's kind of partially crumbling in on itself. And so they decide, you know what, let's just do it anyway. Why not? We won't go in very far. And as they step in roughly about 30 or so feet, they can see that the tunnel actually stops maybe another 50 to 100 feet back because the tunnel's like partially collapsed in and they're not going to be able to make it further. Now, fortunately, the man notices directly off to his left is what he would describe like this makeshift dig out of maybe another tunnel in the works, but it didn't look like it had an end. So they just decided to veer off to the left and go that way. So after going down this way for maybe, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 feet, they noticed the air around them instantly change. It went from a warm and dry to almost instantly damp and cool. And in fact, it wasn't just cool, it was cold. It was what he would describe as a drastic temperature shift. The wife was even shining her light around, looking for any signs of moisture or water, or maybe a gust of wind that would attribute to this sudden dampness and cold, but they couldn't see anything. And in fact, they noticed that directly in front of them, they could have sworn they saw movement, thinking that it was maybe just a small animal. They didn't really go into a lot of detail of what they saw or what they thought they saw, but either way, they were both getting pretty creeped out at this point, but they decided to persist and move further along. Now, as they're going further and further, they're both trying to make light of the situation. They're telling jokes, they're having friendly banter, just doing anything they can to ease the mood. And at some point, as they're heading deeper into this tunnel, they stop because they can hear what they both would describe as low whispering. And so the husband stops his wife physically and says, "Shh, do you hear that?" And she's looking at him intently and he's looking at her and they're listening and the sound's kind of going in and out, right? Just kind of in and out, and they can't really quite make out what it was, but they thought it was whispering, and within 5 to 10 seconds, they start hearing this little pop, 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 what he would describe as feet pitter-pattering coming in their direction. And instantly, as soon as he had heard that, he just felt this immense wave of dread just wash over him. The wife felt the same thing. They are looking at each other, and the only feeling they can describe was that they both needed to get out of there immediately. So without hesitation, they both turn around at the same time unanimously and bolt off back in the opening of the mine. So after about a minute or so, they make their way to the entrance of the mine. They're climbing out, and they both recount hearing a large metal clang. Now, they're not sure if that clang was in correlation to what had just happened in there, but either way, it spooked both of them. And as soon as they got out of the mine, they were talking to each other, asking, "What did you hear? What was that?" And the husband recounted the same thing the wife would later recount, that it sounded like two little feet, not adult feet running at you, but two little feet, bipedal feet, mind you, pitter-pattering, running very quickly in their direction from deeper down the tunnel. Obviously, very spooked by this, the couple made their way about 30 minutes or so back to the car and just decided, you know what, we're done exploring for the night. We're just going to go ahead and crash out in the car and we're going to leave in the morning time. Well, they go back to the car, they both crash out, and the husband recounts that over the course of the night, he had a hard time staying asleep. He would wake up often to the sensation that somebody was watching him from outside the car. But of course, it's pitch black out, the car is off, they can't see anything. So he tells us that he didn't really want to get up and look. He just left it. And as soon as dawn broke, right around 7 or so in the morning, they just turned the car on and they just drove off, not wanting to deal with it anymore. Now, our second eyewitness story comes from a man and his 2 brothers who were actually camping near Big Creek Peak, which was maybe 10 or so miles outside of Kingston. Now, just like the last story, these 3 brothers were very close to the Horton mine. Now, specifically, this family had grown up treasuring the great outdoors. They would go all over hiking and camping and fishing and doing all sorts of extracurricular outdoor activities. And so from the sounds of it, these guys were roughly in their 20s, and this was going to be really one of the first major times they would get to go out on their own excursion together without their parents, bonding and just doing their own thing. So it kind of felt like a rite of passage for the main eyewitness, who was the younger brother of the 3. So you had the main eyewitness, whose name was never revealed. You had his older brother, the middle brother by the name of Kyle, and the oldest brother by the name of Mark. Now, the original plan was to spend the entire weekend from Friday night to Monday morning camping around, maybe trying to find some good fishing spots down by the creek, or I guess in this case river, and just bonding together as brothers. They wanted to mark this special occasion by doing something so memorable and just kind of being out in the desolate wilderness. And this is why they chose this area to set up camp. Now, the first day of traveling out there and setting up camp goes by without a problem. They go and explore, they're looking around the trails, and they get to about late Friday night, and they're just all hanging out by their tent, talking and joking, and the oldest brother stops the younger 2, and he says, "Guys, do you hear that?" And of course, Kyle and the youngest brother, the eyewitness, just thought the older brother Mark was just trying to mess with them. And of course, they humored him and they stopped talking and they're listening, but they couldn't really hear anything, nothing but the sounds of the night around them. And so the older brother Mark just brushed it off like it was no big deal. They went back to doing their thing, they're talking, they're having fun, they're joking, and as it gets closer to bedtime, the older brother, of course, has to go release his bladder. So he steps away behind a tree, probably roughly about maybe 75 or so feet away from the camp, and he swears that out of the blue, coming from deeper in the woodline, away from the camp, he can hear his youngest brother, the eyewitness's voice, beckoning him, pleading to come further into the woods. Now, he notices right away that not only does the situation seem very off, but that the voice he was hearing sounded wrong. It almost sounded as if someone or something was trying to imitate the voice of his younger brother. And then it had this sort of AI robotic quality to it, and that it was like muffled and distorted, similar to that of an AM radio. Immediately, it gave him the creeps. So he zips up and he quickly makes his way back to camp to find his younger brothers, Kyle and the eyewitness, just sitting there looking at him strangely because he's looking at them strangely. And he asks, "Hey, were you over there trying to prank me?" And both the brothers are looking at Mark like, no, are you on drugs? And so Mark is now pale. He's kind of freaked out. And he's saying, "Look, man, I was just over there pissing and I could have sworn I had heard you coming from the woods. Are you sure you're not messing with me?" And both brothers are like, "No, we've been here the whole time. You were only gone for 3 minutes. Just calm down. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this." Now, they're all 3 thoroughly creeped out by how genuine Mark is being, and they're just sitting down talking, trying to make light of the situation the best they can, or at least trying to ease the mood. And the entire time, Mark can't help but feel like something is watching him. So he keeps looking over his shoulder and looking over his shoulder back in the direction that he had to go pee. And he swears that at multiple points, he's seen eye shine. That a pair of eyes like a large deer or a coyote were watching him from that same spot where he had urinated earlier. Now, just like the past story, there was also nobody around here either. It was completely desolate, no one they had encountered, no one they had come across, and nobody around them that was visible at all. To their understanding, they were completely alone. And so at some point in the early morning hours, because they had been staying up talking, they all decide to retire to one large tent, which I guess they were sharing, and they're all able to sleep. Now, at some point come the morning time, they all get up together, and the oldest brother steps out of the tent first and makes note that something is immediately off. because all around their campsite, someone and something had circled at some time in the middle of the night. The eyewitness and his two brothers, Kyle and Mark, had noted that there was visible human tracks circling around the camp multiple times and had veered off in the opposite direction. Now, what's equally strange is that walking along with those human tracks was what looked like very large coyote tracks doing the same thing, also walking alongside the human tracks off in the same direction where those human prints went. And in fact, the direction of where these prints led was actually opposite to where he had urinated the night prior. But this was more than enough for the three boys. They were spooked. They quickly packed up their tent. They hiked back down and they got out of there. They don't know what it was. Now, apparently, a few weeks later, Mark, the oldest brother, actually had a few friends that were Apache, and he started telling his friends about this story. Now, his Apache friends immediately got spooked and told him it sounds like you came across a shapeshifter or a skinwalker. Now, that was just a term they used. They actually have specific names for these kinds of things in their own culture and tribe, because now skinwalkers just kind of become an umbrella term for evil shapeshifters, but that's beside the point. You get the idea. Now, once Mark had learned this, he actually went and told his youngest brother, the eyewitness who was sharing the story, and now all three of the brothers are honestly wondering if they truly had a run-in with a potential shapeshifter of some kind. Maybe they had wandered and camped out in its territory. We don't know, but they can tell us one thing is that they are never going back out to that area again to camp. Now, what I find very interesting about these stories personally is that you have a lot of reservations, small and large, all around the Nevada, Arizona area, well, the entire Southwest. And from my understanding and experience with reading and hearing stories, there are so many strange anomalies and sightings out there of weird stuff, including many what people refer to as skinwalker and shapeshifter encounters and sightings. So, I mean, never say never, right? Now, the last story is actually not the main eyewitness telling the story, but the father of the eyewitness. And the eyewitness goes on to relay that he swears that his father, who had this experience, is a no-nonsense, ex-military, straight shooter kind of guy. You're basically inclined to believe him. Now, the witness explained that back in the years of the late 90s, when his father was just a little bit younger and he was already out of the military, he was hiking around Groves Lake, right around, you guessed it, Horton Mine. Now, his father, whom he referred to as Trent, was in his early 30s and was spending a lot of time in his life hiking outdoors and just really building up his endurance and stamina. Now, his claim is that his father and the two buddies he was with for this experience all had a myriad of strange experiences, but he only shared and wrote down a handful of them. So all of this happened in one evening. So him and his buddies are out there romping around, exploring, and again, like in some of the other stories, they come across an old abandoned mine shaft that they don't actually explore, but they're having more fun just kind of looking around and seeing if they can find anything that looks interesting. They know they are not equipped to actually go in these mine shafts, safely, so they just don't. And they note that this one specifically looks very unsafe and that it could collapse at any given moment. And while they're looking around, just exploring the area really close to the entrance, they both hear this strange sound, all three of them, and they could swear they hear this screaming, screeching noise coming from deep within. Now, the father apparently explained it like the sound of a human and a deer or some sort of cross being crushed to death, or in extreme agony and pain. It was horrendous. It spooked all three of them because it was so unnatural sounding. Now, at this point, they had hiked away from the spot, and not even 1 hour later, both him and his buddies start to see this strange orb, this red, ominous glowing orb of light just manifest in the sky and start to slowly move in the direction over Horton Mine and the area where they had found the abandoned mine they had just been at. And then it just slowly keeps going and starts to dissipate until it's fully gone. Now, at this point, it has become almost sundown, and both Trent, the father of the eyewitness, and his friends all noted this strange particular feeling in the air after seeing this red orb in the sky moving towards that area in the mountains. They could all feel what they would describe as almost a jolt of electricity, as if they had been shocked, but like the air was also filled suddenly full of static electricity. In fact, the father would actually say it reminded him of a thunderstorm, but just minus the humidity. But there's just that feeling in the air that lingers for a short time when a thunderstorm is near. And so him and his buddies who were camping out in this area apparently all noted just how still and eerie and quiet the night was around them, and that from time to time, in that same direction of the mountains and the mine shaft that they were at earlier, they kept hearing these strange noises and things of what they would describe between a mix of a low gurgling and a mechanical sound, something that would happen on and off all throughout the night. But whatever it was actually so low in tone and pitch that it was actually reverberating the ground they were on. Now, I don't know what that could be. Now, apparently, sometime in the middle of the night, probably closer to the early morning, one of his buddies began to violently vomit all over himself. He became very ill, he got pale, he was shaking and convulsing. The other friend had been complaining of pounding, horrendous migraines all throughout the night. He couldn't sleep. For whatever reason, Trent, the father, had not experienced anything weird, but it got to the point that it was so severe, they all three had to go to the hospital. Well, it was more like the father, Trent, taking them there. And after being admitted to the hospital, it appeared that all three men had been exposed to severe radiation poisoning. Now, these were just three guys in their early 30s, all ex-military. They were just romping around, minding their own business, nowhere near any sort of radiation to this degree, and all of a sudden they have these experiences, and they described to the doctors what they saw and experienced, and the doctors didn't really know what to make of it. They could only go by the symptoms that their patients were experiencing. Now, of course, both Trent and his friends would end up being fine, but it was still a really strange experience and just really bizarre. And we're really left wondering, why had Trent not experienced or developed any symptoms, but his two friends did? Now, the real question is there really any correlation between these alleged stories and anything to do at all with the legend of the Horton mine? It's hard to say. But even completely separate of these stories, there's been a lot of talk about ghastly apparitions and ghostly sightings and all sorts of strange things in and around this area, as well as Nevada. What's also interesting is that this area, part of Horton Mine, is really close to the Nevada Triangle, which I'll get to in just a minute. It's kind of like the Bermuda Triangle. It's this area that stretches to around Reno, down to Area 51 in Las Vegas and over to California, and apparently there is a host of strange and bizarre things that happen within this very triangle. It's interesting to me that Horton Mine footage and the three encounter stories all revolve right around this area. Now, bizarrely enough, this same area is extremely rugged and devoid of any real life and has apparently been the site of around 2,000 aircraft crashes alone in the past 60 years. It's been reported that many of these have all been under mysterious circumstances. There's been no clear reason, if at all, why these planes have crashed, and the most strangest of all, wreckage not being found. It's as simply if these planes have crashed and then vanished off into another dimension. There are a few instances that have been large rugged military aircraft like the B-17 Flying Fortresses and of course the B-24 Liberators. I mean, now the most famous crash to have happened within the Nevada Triangle is by, of course, billionaire Stephen Fawcett. Now, the man is famous for a variety of things and holding multiple world records. For example, being the first person to ever fly solo non-stop around the world in a balloon, as well as sailing and aviation. He has a myriad of other achievements like being a part of the Royal Geographical Society and Explorers Club. He is also an extremely talented pilot with a variety of different aircraft and is extremely well respected and revered in the world of aviation. So it was September 3rd, 2007 when something strange begun. Stephen had left from the Flying M Ranch located in Nevada, and so he hops into his single-engine light aircraft for a quick round-trip joy flight. The plan was simple enough: to take off, enjoy the open skies, and simply land back at the same airport as he left. I mean, after all, Fawcett was a seasoned aviator, flying in near-perfect weather conditions. Nothing could go wrong, right? Well, when Fawcett did not return as planned, folks started getting concerned, and in no time, an intricate, large-scale hunt was launched to find this master of the skies. And for almost a month, search teams scoured the harsh, unforgiving terrain of a 20,000 square mile area. They strained their eyes, scanning every inch of the vast wasteland for any signs of Fawcett or his plane. But to no avail. Not even a tiny shred of wreckage was ever discovered, at least for the time being. And there was no peep from the plane's emergency locator transmitter. Now, the extensive search, which had become one of the most publicized and expensive in U.S. history, had surprisingly managed to dig up long-lost crashed planes from decades past. However, Fawcett himself seemed to have vanished into thin air, and officially, the search came to a halt on September 19, 2007, with many resigning themselves to the likelihood of Fawcett's demise. And more than a week later, on October 2nd, the endless pursuit for answers was abandoned. But there were those who refused to let go of hope. Faithful believers in Fawcett's survival persisted, mounting private search flights in a desperate bid to locate him. I mean, heck, there was even a group of psychics attempting to pinpoint his whereabouts. The following year, August 23, 2008, a colossal ground search took place based on the newfound clues, but alas, Fawcett remained an enigma. And as with any great mystery, people began crafting their own explanations for the disappearance. Some told about Fawcett orchestrating his own death, escaping to a new life elsewhere. Darker theories had insinuated that he was actually shot down after unwittingly venturing too close to Area 51. Others claimed he stepped into a bizarre vortex or was even whisked away by otherworldly entities. And so, on September 29, 2008, a lone hiker who was scaling and exploring the treacherous terrain of the Nevada Triangle, and he stumbled upon something truly chilling. Amidst the harsh wilderness, he found possessions that once belonged to Steve Fawcett, the world-famous adventurer aviator who vanished into thin air on September 3rd the year prior. The remnants of Fawcett's past were haunting: a crumpled FAA-issued card, a Soaring Society of America membership card, and an eerie clump of $1,005 in cash, all in an area about 65 miles from where the adventure had last taken off. The discovery of these unsettling relics had breathed new life into the search efforts. Now, what happened next was nothing short of astounding. On October 1st, 2008, the skyward gaze of aerial search teams finally found what they'd been seeking this entire time: the wreckage of Steve Fawcett's plane, just 750 yards from where the belongings had been unearthed. But Fawcett's body remained elusive, despite the grisly discovery of 2 human bones, which confirmed through DNA analysis to actually be his. Eerily, the rest of his remains were never found, likely scattered by the wildlife that roamed the unforgiving terrain. Now, examination of the aircraft actually showed no signs of equipment malfunction. The most plausible explanation behind this cataclysmic event was that intense downdrafts of up to 400 miles per hour had simply outmatched Fawcett's aircraft. Combined with the disorienting effect of the high altitude and perilous mountainous landscapes, the sudden volatile weather in the Sierra Nevada mountain range continues to loom maliciously, preying on unsuspecting pilots and planes. The mountain's relationship to the jet stream can create an unpredictable effect known as the mountain wave, which can yank small planes from the sky and hurl them down to the ground like toys. Inexperienced pilots who fly above the Nevada Triangle near the Sierra Nevada have all reported feeling profoundly disoriented, underestimating the power and duplicity of these very mountains. Now, similar to the story we just discussed, one Army fighter pilot, Lieutenant Leonard C. Lydon, claimed he had parachuted from his plane when his squadron got lost in the mountains. Now, it's his claim that he clearly saw the P-40 fighter go down roughly a mile from his current position, right near the Sequoia and Kings National Park. He was certain that that is where it had crashed, but when search teams scoured that area, looking in the specific area he claimed it to be, well, there was no sign of any wreckage or any evidence of any plane crash. However, no one's really sure why so many planes keep going down here. Some of the supposed planes that have crashed here are large ones with very experienced crews and under ideal, perfect conditions. There are many that insist that forces beyond our understanding aid in the mystique of the area. I mean, of course, you can't mention the Nevada Triangle without mentioning Area 51 or top secret government facilities, otherwise known more commonly as DUMBs, or of course aliens or supernatural entities. Of course, there's also the mention of magnetic anomalies or even a vortex. But more importantly, I want to know what you guys think. Is the Horton mine footage genuine, and was Frank being honest? Is there any truth at all to the 3 eyewitness stories that I shared with you guys today? Could there very well be supernatural things happening in and around the area? And what became of Stephen Fawcett? Did he simply just crash without a cause, or was there truly another force at work? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you guys enjoyed today's video, be sure to go ahead and slap that like and subscribe button for more content just like this. As always, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you guys in the very next video.